Hey everybody, back again. Gonna do another tier list. I don't care. You guys can deal with that. That's what happens when you try and wing a half script. Okay, so we're doing another tier list. This time we're gonna be doing the Haven faction, which I'm gonna be just flat out honest, has so far proven to be my least favorite faction to play. I don't necessarily think they're bad in comparison to the other three factions that are available in the demo right now, but I'm gonna need someone to help convince me that they're not the worst, because I'm pretty sure that they are. They have a lot of problems, and I don't know if they yet have the tools to solve those problems. And we'll kind of discuss that a little bit as we get into the tier list. The other thing I want to note before we begin, same thing we did last time, I'm using kind of a multifaceted rating system, so they're not going to look exactly how a lot of other people might see them, because I'm comparing them not only to, like, the swordsman is not being compared strictly to other Haven units, he's being compared to other tier 1 units in relation to his position and in the Haven castle, if that makes any sense. Maybe it'll make sense more when you see that part kind of get talked about more and we place them on the tier list. I also rate them on availability, like how affordable is their dwelling if you're the faction and you're looking to make more of them. How much do you want? How much do you want / need that dwelling and or upgraded dwelling in the case of the upgrades? How easy is it to find just them on the map? Do they have a lot of dwellings usually laying around? Can you recruit them that way? How much do you want the unit as a Haven hero versus how much do you want it as a non-Haven hero can also make an impact, or non-Haven faction, I should say. Because that makes a difference too. There are some units that are just so good that you want to use them even if they're not a part of your faction. And there's going to be a little bit of bias. It's a tier list. There's no way to stop that. But I always try to do my best to remove as much bias as I can. Says the guy who already admitted this is his least favorite faction. So take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt and feel free to jump in the comments and explain to me why I'm wrong, because I would like to not despise the faction and I would like to get better with them. And it's probably, well, I want to say that it's probably just my own inability to properly utilize the faction is why I don't like them. I'm not sure that's exactly why. It might be a factor in it. That we'll see. But let's just jump into the tier list here and see if we can discuss this a little bit. Maybe if I discuss why I think certain units are good or bad, it'll give you reason to yell at me in the comments. So, without further ado, let's jump into this. We have the swordsman here, the Haven's tier 1. It's a pretty healthy unit. It's 12 HP, I think. I got all the other ones listed here. Yeah, 12 HP is the most HP, tied with the Sylvan unit, what's it called? The Fawn, for most HP. And it's got a solid 4 attack and 4 defense, so it's crushing most of the other tier 1 units, in fact, all of the other tier 1 units, by a hefty margin in terms of just health, attack, defense, even its damage. I don't think it's the highest. Let me double check damage before I say anything. It's gonna get me yelled at. Yeah. Okay, so its damage is very high, tied with the Nat from Haven. We are doing Haven. From Hive, sorry, the other H word. It is a little bit weaker than the Fawn, who does 3 to 4 damage, but 2 to 3, it's still pretty respectable damage. 3 speed, I think we discussed this last time with the Troglodyte, but I'm going to bring it up again. 3 speed as a tier 1 is it's acceptable. It's not great, but there's not a whole lot of other tier ones other than and I'm going to mispronounce this here, so Rashoth, I think is how you pronounce the Schism unit. Rashoth has 4 speed, and does the Pixie? Pixie has 8 speed. Okay, so the Pixie crushes all the tier 1s in speed and is the outline variable. So yeah, 3 speed is fine. It's not great, but it's fine comparative to other tier 1s. Its initiative of 6 is good. It will be useful early in the game as you get into fights with higher tier units, neutral units I'm specifying, or even with other heroes as they start to bring in some of their armies. The 6 is not going to be terribly impressive, but it's useful during a lot of the early game fights against neutral creatures who 6 is comparable to them, probably a little higher than some, and lower than a few less type of thing. It's fine. 0 morale, 0 luck. You know, it's a human. What are you going to do? They're pretty decent overall. This is probably one of the few tier 1 units that I actually don't hate. They're not strictly speaking good, but I think they do a serviceable job as far as a tier 1 is concerned. I'm going to give them C tier here. I think that makes a lot of sense. They don't have like a super good growth. They have a growth, weekly growth of 18. So they're better than some. They're worse than others. They're kind of at this happy medium. Their stats more than make up for their, at this point, kind of, mediocre growth. So they're fine. I don't hate the swordsmen. I think they're fine. They do their job, which actually, if you were watching the previous one, it's similar to the troglodyte. They're very good at just taking hits off of your other big important units. And unlike the troglodyte, they not only do a good job of taking the hit, they can also dish it out pretty well. They're a pretty good unit. I don't hate them at all. Oh, I forgot to completely mention their passive here real quick. So their passive ability is they take 30% less damage from range units. So it's actually pretty cool to just watch them run at the enemy and you're taking damage because the enemy's going to be pelting you, but it's another way that they just kind of survive long enough to get up to the enemy and start beating on them. Pretty good unit. I don't hate them at all. I know I've said that a lot, but roll with me here. All right, so the first upgrade. What do we got? Guard Captain. The Guard Captain is a very minor statistical improvement. It gets 1 extra speed is the only difference between it and the swordsman. Its major claim to fame is it gets double strike. I'm going to be honest with you. I generally like playing a more offensive game. I like to play aggressive. I like to do damage. In Heroes Might Magic, I am a proponent of the best defense is a good offense. If the enemy has less numbers than you, when they hit you, they're doing less damage. And you want to make the enemy's numbers go down, you have to hit them with your big numbers. And hitting them twice does that. So, yeah, I do like the Guard Captain. The one thing I will say about Haven, and this is one that's probably going to be a little bit more hotly contested, but I think a lot of their early game units are actually worth some of that early game arcane dust, including the swordsman. I don't think, like, if you, again, okay, I'm going to keep referencing that other video with the dungeon, but unlike the dungeon where their units don't make hugely valuable use out of the early game arcane dust that you get, except for the Minotaur, who makes the best use out of it. Or the infiltrator does. The infiltrator does pretty well, actually. The point being, I think, for example, I think that these guard captains are good enough via their double strike to merit putting that early game arcane dust into upgrading their structure. I think they're pretty good. The extra speed, as we talked about, I'm a big fan of speed, and I think that double strike, they retain, I should know, yeah, they still retain the range defense, 30% less damage, and they get double strike. I just think they're a really good unit, and I don't really feel bad investing a little bit of arcane dust early on. I think these guys, I think the soldiers or the swordsmen are a good sword. I don't know where I'm going. You know what I'm trying to say. I don't know where I'm going with that thought. Next one, Sun's Aegis, the alternate promote. Increases the health from 12 to 15, increases the defense from 4 to 7, and increases the initiative from 6 to 7. Overall, some pretty good improvements. It's much bulkier. 3 HP and 3 defense is not a small nerf or a small buff by any means. That's a huge buff. These guys can really take a hit. Again, I'm not, as I just said, I'm not much of I don't generally play a defensive game, but I can respect this level of bulk in a unit, especially a tier 1. They also trade in the range defense 1 for Aegis, which basically just applies the 30% range reduction to not only themselves, but to all adjacent allies, which is pretty cool. It does lead me to believe, not that you need to or should do this, but it does lead me to oftentimes leave them kind of hanging around near the back to protect my shooters from the enemy shooters. I'm not saying it's the best use of them. I know I've had a lot of success doing that, and then just have these range wars that you can win simply because you're reducing the enemy's damage by such a high degree. They also have Anointed for defense, which is whenever this unit gains a positive effect, it increases its defense by 2 until the end of combat. Positive effect refers primarily to spells, but there's also plenty of ways to use focus points from different creatures to add buffs and debuffs. So you can make these guys really, really tanky. I think they're good, again, but simply because, as I said, I'm more of an offense guy than a defense guy, I'm going to put them behind the guard captain, but I think the Sun's Aegis is a very fine investment, all things considered. And I've had a lot of success with them in the past as well. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to start. That's where we're going to start our tier list. Looks a lot nicer than the previous one, with Troglodytes sitting in F tier. So, next up, we have the Crossbowman. So 10 health, 5 attack, and 3 defense, and 3 to 4 damage, you'd be forgiven for thinking you're looking at a tier 1 unit. Because outside of the 5 attack, which is rather respectable, the rest of their stats look basically like the swordsman. They got, I forgot to mention, they have 3 speed and 5 initiative. So they don't look terribly impressive statistically. The View from the Heavens passive is pretty cool, I guess. You know, it increases your hero's sight radius by 1 while they're in the army. Does not stack. But I'll be honest, I don't know how many people would agree or disagree, but I feel like Vision is just a little underrated in the Heroes community as a whole, not necessarily the highest levels. Or maybe it's just because I play way too much Dota, where Vision is just the key to victory. But I like having extra vision. And 1 extra vision isn't a lot, but when you consider that it's coming from a unit that you otherwise just want to have in your inventory or your army, like, I'm not going to complain about it. It's just a nice little extra boost that he's given you for taking him along. He also has an active ability called Fine Bolt 1, which deals 20% or plus 20% damage. It's an activated ability. It takes 2 focus points. It lasts for 2 rounds. So for 2 rounds, I'm going to phrase this wrong. Hold on. So for the round you use it, because it does not end your turn, and the round following, you get 20% bonus damage. It's a pretty decent ability, and the Crossbowman kind of needs it. Yeah, 5 attack is pretty decent, and 3 to 4 damage is fine, more or less. But I'll be honest, I always feel like the Crossbowman just doesn't really do a lot of work. I don't know how else to phrase this. It feels to me like whenever I got Crossbowman, yeah, I need to keep them in large stacks. I feel like I don't really feel comfortable splitting them because their damage always feels just a little wimpy. And so keeping them in a large stack for that fine bolt, I've found to be rather successful. But overall, the crossbowman doesn't impress me. I don't think it's a bad unit, mind you. Let me make that perfectly clear. I don't think it's a bad unit, but I do think it's just a little lacking. And I'm torn. I want it to be below the swordsman because I think the swordsman is more valuable. Just don't know if it truly belongs in D. I don't think it's that bad. I really don't. I don't think it's that bad to be in D tier. Let me take a quick double look at, or double take. There we go. That's what you say. A double take at the other tier 2 units it's kind of competing against. And it's pretty decent when compared to the other tier 2 units. It definitely holds its own. So I will put it in C tier. I don't think it deserves D tier. I think it's just a me thing where I feel like I want it to do more. And again, it's not a bad unit. I always feel just a little underwhelmed when I'm using the standard crossbowman. And I think that reason is, as we move into the upgrades here, I'm going to mispronounce this here, the Austringer. I think it's pronounced Austringer, right? The Austringer, it adds 1 extra speed to the crossbowman, and that's all it does statistically. But it gains the passive trait double shot. And that really helps solve the marksman's problem. Because, like I said, I always feel like the marksman is just a little underperforms. And I think the double shot is why. I think they had the intention of the Austringer always kind of being an upgrade. You know, whether they made the marksman before or after the Austringer, I don't know. But I feel like the developers made the Austringer and the crossbowman stats under the impression that the Austringer was just going to be one of the upgrades. And as a result, the crossbowman had to kind of suffer because they didn't want to make the Austringer so much better that it would be the default upgrade. But it retains fine bolt. The double shot is so good. And more importantly, maybe not more importantly, let me do this. Let me talk quickly about the marksman, then I'll go into that point, because I think it's important I talk about the marksman first here. So the marksman increases the attack stat by 1, the speed by 1, and the initiative by, is that 2? Yeah, that's 2. Okay, by 2, which is really nice. It's at a 7 initiative with that plus 2. We were talking about how the swordsman 6 is kind of decent, kind of lets it go before a few things, but not everything. The 7's a little bit more impressive early in the game. That'll get you ahead of a lot of different units that you could be fighting on the map there. Retains view from the heavens, but it gains sharpshooter, allowing you to deal full range damage at any range. It retains fine bolt 2, but it also gets piercing shot, which costs 1 focus point to use and deals 50% damage, but the target takes plus 20% damage until the end of the round. So the marksman deals 50% less damage to the target, but the target takes 20% incoming damage from all other sources. If you're a primal spellcaster, you can make use of that. If you got some really high-ish units that are waiting, I'm just going to spit one out, for example, like the Angel, you can lob this in there, hit the enemy unit, and then you can really abuse the 20%. It's a good ability, and the fact that you are doing full damage at any range means that even that 50% hit doesn't feel like it's really like it kind of feels like you're returning to like the marksman, or not the marksman, this is the marksman, I'm sorry, the crossbowman's like damage level, but you retain the 20%, or you give everyone else 20% damage. It's what I'm trying to say is it's pretty good. The marksman, and this is what I should know. This is what I was going to talk about before. I want to say it now. So this is probably one of only a handful of units that I find myself switching the upgrade in over the course of the game. I find, and people can argue with me all they want, I find that early in the game I really enjoy having the Ostringer when I'm dealing with a lot of the neutrals and some of the early hero encounters. And then as the game goes on and you start to get into more and more siege battles, I find the marksman to just be more efficient at those. So I'll just swap the upgrade when the chance is provided. I really like that. I don't know if it's a good thing. It's probably not that important. I'm pretty sure the marksman's just kind of better overall. But I do like how I've convinced myself, if nothing else, that you can feel, how should I say this? That you can I feel like there's a reason to take one upgrade and eventually switch it. And similar to the swordsman, I'm going to put them both up here. I will put the marksman ahead because I do think it's a little bit better. Not necessarily a lot, but a little bit better. Then again, you can do some pretty cheeky stuff with double attack. I'll leave the marksman up there, though. It's fine. They're not that big of a difference. They're very close. I think the marksman's a little better. But there's... So again, this is another one, as you can see, where I would say if you got some early Arcane Dust, this is another unit that's well worth putting that Arcane Dust investment into. So, next up, the Griffin. Oh, the Griffin. Heroes of Might and Magic just has never been able to really figure the Griffin out, in my opinion. In Heroes 1 and even 2, to a greater extent, it was a decent enough unit. It wasn't anything you'd write home about. It just kind of came in, did its job, and got the hell out. It was a unit. It was fine. It locked down a range unit or two. In Heroes 3, the Griffin was nice and fast, which was one of the few units the castle faction had that had pretty decent speed outside of the Angel and the Cavalier, both of which were much higher level units. So like that felt nice, but the Griffin itself was not super impressive. It again just was. It was there. It was fine. I guess it did all right. Heroes 4 was probably, or at least in my opinion, Heroes 4, the Griffin saw its best incarnation being a tier 3 unit in the game where there's only 4 tiers of units. And I think it did all right. The way sieges worked in that game kind of gimped flying units because you had to destroy the door before flying units had full reign inside of the enemy's castle. So that hurt, but overall I think the Griffin just did perfectly fine. I think it was, in my opinion, its most memorable form was in Heroes 4, where it actually felt like it could do what it had always wanted to do, which was abuse its unlimited retaliation ability. Heroes 5 kind of reverted back to Heroes 3. The Griffin probably had a stronger showing, at least in my opinion, in Heroes 5 than in Heroes 3. But again, kind of just there doing its job. Nothing to write home about. And now we get to Olden era, and the Griffin is... I don't know how to say this other than I just don't think the Griffin knows what it wants to do. And this will make a little bit more sense when we get to talk about the upgrades. But its health is like fine. Let me double check before I say anything that's going to get my ass railed. Its health is fine. It's not like low by any means, but it's not high. It's just good enough. You know, there's a few things at tier 3 that compete with it. There's a handful of things that outdo it. It's just got good enough HP. Its attack and defense are in the same boat. It's 8 and 8. Some things have higher in one or the other. Some things have lower. It's fine. It doesn't have its damage rate. Like everything about the Griffin just feels really kind of average. Its initiative is 9. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Its initiative is really high. So it's a nice high initial unit. Early in the game, gets you the first turn relatively frequently. Not guaranteed by any means, but it's a nice way to kind of help force yourself into the highest initial slot. 4 speed it's fine. Again, 4 speed, there's a lot of things at this point that when you're fighting tier 1, 2, 3, 4 units, they're going to have 4 speed, so it's difficult, though not impossible, for the Griffin to outmaneuver things. It has the alert 1, so it counterattacks 1 extra time. That's good. I mean, I don't hate alert 1. I think alert 1 is cool. Double counterattacks. Valiant Cry is really nice. Increases the unit's attack by 5 and its initiative by 1. For 2 rounds. It does not end the turn, so for the round you use it and one after. It's a pretty good ability. It sort of fixes the Griffin's kind of problem that we're going to talk about here. It gives it more attack, which is great, so it hits harder. The extra initiative is cool, so that following round it'll act sooner. Or if you wait after using this, it'll help you act later. It's a good ability. I'm not going to lie. It's a good ability, and it helps, but it doesn't solve the Griffin's biggest problem, which is just this alert 1 is great, but I never feel comfortable using my Griffin aggressively, and not, mind you, not that I don't use it aggressively, but I don't like to use it as this frontline combatant where it could actually make use of its alert 1, because it's just not bulky enough to do that. Nor does it hit hard enough without the Valiant Cry on to do that either. So again, it sits in kind of this weird limbo where it wants to be a frontline fighter that abuses its extra retaliation, but it's not bulky enough to do that, nor does it hit hard enough, again without the Valiant Cry, to do that either. It's got flight, which is nice, but its speed is 4, which is not so nice. I'm honestly really disappointed in the Griffin. I'm going to put it in D tier. Feel free to fight me again in the comments, but I feel it's a very underwhelming unit. And you'll hopefully, when I talk about the other 2 Griffins, it'll help you to understand what I mean by it's underwhelming and doesn't know what it wants to do. We'll start with the Temple Griffin, which is what's next on the list there. Increases the speed by 2 up to 6, and the initiative by 3 from 9 to 12. The Valiant Cry is improved from Valiant Cry 1 to 2, which increases the attack boost from 5 to 10, which is amazing, and the initiative from 1 to 2, which is also really good. It also has endless counterattacks with Alert 2, so yay, unlimited retaliation. Great. Valiant Cry increases attack. It can do a lot of damage. Fantastic. Its bulk didn't change, so it's still kind of just when it comes to bulk. So once again, I don't feel confident frontlining this, which is what it feels like it wants to do with endless counterattack and that Valiant Cry buff. It's just not bulky enough to do that. It does make for a good sting operative. Like, 6 speed's pretty good. 2 turns to cross the map. You can kind of avoid the main fight, flying high or low on the map and sneaking up on a shooter with the Valiant Cry. Like, you know, if you precision strike these Griffins, they can do a shitload of damage. But the endless counterattack then doesn't mean anything because you're only going to be fighting one at best. Maybe there's another unit nearby that you're, going to be engaged with. So you only ever would need the +1 counterattack, which you don't have. You have now endless. So yeah, like I said, I feel like the Griffin's confused as to what it wants to do in life, because it's like I want to endlessly counter with my kind of middling bulk, but I can hit hard, which is, again, a good thing to have when you have endless counterattack. It's just you're going to lose a lot of Griffins in the process of frontlining them. I do think that this is an improvement on the Griffin as a whole, but I'm not sure I'd ever feel confident spending the Arcane Dust early in the game on a Griffin when the Marksman and Swordsman, I think, just benefit more from the Arcane Dust. So I'm going to put it lower than the Griffin, even though it's probably better, because I'd rather just have a normal Griffin if I'm going to use the Griffin at all, and rather than spend the Arcane Dust. I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but like other factions, when they get the unit, I don't see the other factions being super happy to get a Griffin. The Undead, maybe. The Undead tend to have very high defensive statted heroes, so they can help to compensate for the Griffin's middling one. You could say the same thing about the Knight heroes, though. Not so much the Clerics, but the Knights tend to have pretty decent defense, too. I think the Death Knights do a little bit better than the Knights, in my opinion, when it comes to defense. So maybe, and the Undead are also really good at reviving units. I don't think they are very good at keeping living units around for an extended period of time, but they're pretty good at keeping things around at least temporarily. So there's an argument that the Undead might be able to make a lot of use out of the upgraded Griffin, not necessarily a lot out of the basic Griffin. I don't really see Schism doing a whole lot with the Griffin. Sylvan probably not too much. Hive, honestly, even between Sylvan, I probably shouldn't have spoken too much on Sylvan because we don't really have Sylvan and Hive. We don't really have their units to compare with, not the whole faction yet. But I don't think there's a whole lot any of the other factions are really going to do with a Griffin, a Temple Griffin. As far as the Marksman and Swordsman, I think my rating stands. I think the other factions would basically do the exact same thing that the Temple is doing with these units. And if you picked them up at a merc camp, or you found a group of them through diplomacy or a dwelling outside, like I think that the rating stands for them. I don't think there's enough. I don't think they're so good outside of their own faction that it buffs them up at all. Anyway, getting back on track, the Guardian Griffin. So here we go. Here we're getting some stat ups. 2 extra attack from 8 to 10. 2 extra defense from 8 to 10. Damage up from 5 to 9. Well, I wouldn't say up. But the damage changed from 5 to 9 to a flat 7, which was its average damage before, but now it's always 7. There's no up or down. Speed is up by 1 to 5, and initiative is up by 1 to 10. Overall, just really good stat increases. Pretty nice. Nothing to complain about. It retains the alert 1 instead of getting the infinite counterattack from alert 2. However, it gains Loyal Protector, which allows it to perform its counterattack each time an adjacent enemy attacks a friendly unit. To make sure that everyone's on the same page, for those who aren't as familiar, it attacks a unit. It'll counterattack an enemy who is adjacent to the Griffin if said adjacent enemy attacks one of the Griffin's allies. I don't really know if I can... I could probably explain it more if I broke it down even more, but I hope that's enough. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Its Valiant Cry is also improved to Valiant Cry 2, giving it the +10 attack and the +2 initiative over the original 5 and 1. Okay, I'm going to be honest. Of the 3 Griffins, I actually really like this one. I still think it's a little confused as to what it wants to do in life. But I think this is a really neat thing. I think the Loyal Protector is an amazing ability. And I think it kind of synergizes with Temple's, or at least from what I tend to do with Temple's playstyle, where you can kind of rely on your 3 different shooters as your primary damage source. And this gives the Griffin more value out of its counterattacks and its alert 1, because now the Griffin doesn't want to be the front line. Now the Griffin just wants to be hanging back and protecting its allies. So its middling bulk, not a big deal anymore, because, I mean, it might get attacked, but its goal isn't to be in the thick of things, fighting and performing retaliation attacks over and over and over again. It just wants to be standing next to a marksman or a light weaver or an angel or all 3. And whenever those guys get attacked, be like, nope, I get to punish you as well. I think it's a really cool and unique take on the Griffin, and I think this is the direction the Griffin kind of wants to be, like, comparative to the other 2 Griffins, which again kind of sort of feel like they want to be frontline units, but they don't have the bulk to be frontline units. And then this one just kind of leans further into the not a frontline unit, but I can, make use of my alert ability anyway. I really like this Griffin. I still don't know if I would spend the Arcane Dust, at least not early on, mind you. If I had some spare Arcane Dust, I would probably do it, because I think this is a really good unit, but I think it shines the most kind of in the mid game and onward, where you're going to get into larger scale battles and protecting your shooters becomes even more crucial. But I think it's far better than the normal Griffin, and even the I keep wanting to say Royal Griffin. What's it called? Temple Griffin. I'd say it's even a whole tier better. So yeah, I do think that is a really, I really like that Griffin. I think it does really well. Okay, Light Weaver. All right, where do we begin on the Light Weaver? It's basically just an enhanced Griffin. It's got a little bit more HP, a little bit more attack, a little bit more defense. And by a little bit, I mean it's got 35 health, 10 attack, 10 defense. It does a set amount of damage, so it's always blessed, so to speak, at 11 damage. 2 speed, but it's a shooter, so speed's a little bit more forgivable to be ass on a shooter, because they usually don't have to move a whole lot. The initiative of 4, unfortunately, means that you're going to be acting very, very late in the initiative. Probably last, more often than not. Kind of sucks, but overall, it's a pretty decent unit. It has the ability Inner Light, which increases friendly units' attack and defense by 5, their speed and initiative by 1, lasts for 1 round. Now, I was talking about how the Griffin doesn't really frontline very well. You could Inner Light the Griffin to help with that, 5 extra attack and defense. The problem is that you're spending 1 of your focus points to do that, and Valiant Cry costs 2. So you would need all 3 to turn your Griffin into the mega monster that you would want it to be. Not saying you can't or shouldn't do that. I'm just saying you're probably not going to get a lot of opportunities to do that. But I do think Inner Light's a great ability nonetheless. It does, due to the initiative of 4, mean that you're probably going to be casting it on units that you've used the wait command on. So there's probably not a whole lot of opportunity to cast it on, say, an angel or a marksman, because there's very good chance that your other ranged units are taking their turn to actually attack. But it could go well on, like, a champion does really well with it. The Inquisitors do well with it. Again, the Griffin does well with it. So some of your units that might actually use the wait command could definitely benefit from it, especially the speed on some of them. Inquisitor, I'm looking at you. So I think it's a good ability. I think the Lightweaver is a pretty decent unit. It doesn't really scream fantastic unit. As I scroll past the other tier 4s here, it's definitely not like bad in comparison to them, but it also doesn't really stand out. I don't feel like it's really selling itself. It's just, it's one of those kind of middle of the road units. It does its job. It's good enough. Oh, the other thing I haven't been talking about is the expense of the dwellings. Let's go back and do that really quick, because that's important for these guys. Well, the first 2 units, you in pretty much every map are going to have access to their dwellings right off the bat, so the cost of them is free. The Griffin does have a very cheap dwelling. I think it's just a little bit of wood and some ore with money. I don't think there's any rare resources involved in it. And the Griffin Rookery, or whatever it's called, or its upgrade. So that's definitely more accessible. The Lightweaver, though, this is where I wanted to lightly touch on that, because they are a little bit tougher to afford. They need Mage Guild level 1, which isn't a huge investment. 5 ore, 5 wood. Is it 2k or 3k? I always forget if it's 2 or 3k for the Mage Guild 1. Is it 2.5? No, 2.5, or the upgrades cost 2.5. I don't think the base one costs 2.5. Now I'm blanking. I don't have time to. I'm gonna be here all day if I keep thinking about that. We need Mage Guild level 1, which isn't a huge investment, except for the fact that their dwelling after that. Oh, and they need the Rookery. Sorry, they need the Griffin Rookery and the Mage Guild. But their dwelling itself does have a small cost to it. Some gems. Is it all 3? Yeah, it is all 3 rare resources, and it's not much. But I think it's 2 or 3 of all the rare resources. Something like 2 or 3 of all the, I think. Or is it just a lot of gems? Is it just a pile of like 5 or 6 gems? I am blanking, and I don't. The wiki I'm on does not have dwellings. Really unfortunate. I know it costs a little bit of money, is the point. There's definitely a bit of an investment involved. It's not going to break your bank. Chances are you'll run into a few of the random resources scattered around enough to afford their dwelling. So it shouldn't be bank breaking. I'm going to put them in C tier. I'll put them at the top of C tier because they're pretty decent for what they do. And I would rather rush, if possible, Lightweavers over trying to like mass swordsman or mass marksman. I think they do a good enough job to merit trying to get a chunk of them. So I'll put them at the higher end of C tier. I think that's fair. All right, the Hierophant. So the Hierophant increases the attack stat by 2, and the defense stat by 4, and the speed stat by 2, making it go from 10 to 12 attack, 10 to 14 defense, and 2 to 4 speed. A nice little improvement. The speed is, again, I'm not going to knock having speed, but range units don't need a lot of speed, so 4 is great, but you're not going to make a whole lot of use out of it. But it's nice to have it, so nothing to complain about. Maintains inner light, but also gains holy ablution. The holy ablution dispels all negative effects from all friendly units and fully restores their HP. Does not affect undead, embodiments, or constructs. It takes all 3 of your focus points, but oh man, that can definitely be a game changer. There, you got the enemy throwing out some of their mass slows, or I guess web in this one is the slow equivalent. But they're throwing out their mass webs. They're throwing out what is that tier 5 one that I really like? The arcane spell that +1 to your speed initiation, -1 to the enemy speed initiation. I forget what it's called. Something's I believe it's called. But there's just all sorts of negative effects in the game that are going to be passed around, and the ability to just be like, get rid of all of them. We're starting from scratch. It's an expensive 3 focus points, but it's a nice little boost. Really feels good. Retains the 11 damage, so these guys are good. The upgraded dwelling, I think it costs 6 gems. I think. Is it 5 gems? It might be 5 gems. It's 5 or 6 gems. I don't think it's any other additional rare resources. So it does take a little bit of an investment. It's also going to be the arcane dust, which is 40. Yeah, they'd be 40 arcane dust. So it's definitely a hefty investment. I'm not, like, as great as Holy Ablution is, I don't think you need it, like, early in the game. You don't really need it versus neutral, so it's something that's going to come into effect in the later portions of the game once you start encountering enemy heroes. So I don't feel like you're pressured to get the upgrades, so I'm going to put them there. Or below, because I don't think you really need the upgrade. The extra little bit of damage you get from the attack going up by 2 is nice. The extra defense is fine. But you're a range unit, so the damage you're taking by default is not going to be super high to begin with because enemies have to close the distance. So I just don't feel like anything you get out of the Hierophant is so necessary that you have to force, like, to buy the dwelling. I don't feel like other... Well... No, I don't think the other factions care at all about this unit is the thing. Like again, the Holy Ablution, maybe, but that's more of something you would need later in the game, and you're not going to pick up a small little stack of these just for Holy Ablution. So yeah, I don't think any other faction really cares about Lightweaver. And then the Sun Herald is, well, basically the same thing as the Hierophant, but reversed. So 14 attack instead of 14 defense, 12 defense instead of 14 defense. It does have 3 speed instead of 4, but it does get 5-ish over that lousy 4. It also loses its permanent bless of 11 damage, instead gaining an 11 damage as its base value, and now can deal up to 18. So while it now has a damage range, you're still not out anything because its minimum damage didn't change. It only can be better than it used to be. It actually loses Inner Light. That's right, they do lose that. So I'm wondering where that went. So yeah, they actually lose Inner Light and instead get Exaltation, which is another one focus point. That's what it's called. Another 1-cost focus point. And its target friendly unit deals maximum damage, so it's Ye Olde Bless for 2 rounds. That's actually really, really big for a lot of different reasons. I mean, Bless, for those of you who haven't necessarily played some of the older Heroes games, was already one of the better spells in the game. The ability to force your creatures, or if you had Mass Bless, all of your creatures to deal the maximum damage that they could potentially deal. It's not something to take lightly. It's a very big difference. Most importantly is, let me double check all of the damage ranges here before I make an ass of myself. So yeah, most of the damage ranges for Temple are fairly acceptable. Let's see, Inquisitor has a damage range of 4. Cavalry has a damage range of 4. Griffins was a damage range of 4. Yeah, like they've got a damage range, so they definitely will benefit from Bless. The really, or Exaltation, I guess in this case. I'm going to keep calling it Bless by accident. I apologize for that. Sort of. I'm just going to keep calling it Bless anyway. The Angels are the ones who really benefit from it because their damage range is 50 to 75. So making your entire Angel stack deal 75 damage per Angel instead of anywhere from 50 to 75 can make a huge difference. And again, your other units definitely can benefit from it too. So Exaltation is a really good ability. It also has a new passive. Well, it actually gained its first passive trait because the other ones didn't have any passive traits, which is Anointed for damage, which is whenever this unit gains a positive effect, it gains +1 damage until the end of battle. That's both to minimum and to maximum. It doesn't change its damage range, it just increases its whole damage range by 1. I like this unit only because, as I've said already, I like to play offensively, I like to play aggressively, I like to do damage before the enemy gets a chance to deal damage. And the Sun's Herald is pretty good at that. It deals pretty good damage, and more importantly, it allows you to deal more damage. As much as I like it, though, I still don't think I would be hard-pressed to rush the upgrade, because I think its damage is still kind of just fine. It's pretty good. I'm not going to knock its damage output. But the Exaltation's biggest benefit is on your Angel. And more importantly, it's really going to make the biggest difference once you start engaging enemy heroes in kind of the end of the early, beginning of the mid game type of a thing. So there's no real rush, I don't feel, to upgrade again, but I do prefer them over the Hierophants. Okay, so next up, Cavaliers. This threw me for a loop, I'll be honest, a little story time here. When I first saw the Cavalier, I immediately just assumed it was a tier 6, because that's generally been where the Cavalier is 1 under the Angel. It was like that, well, I shouldn't say 1 under the Angel, but 1 under whatever the highest tier was. And tier was 1 and 2, it was 1 under the Crusader, which was the highest tier at 6 at the time. The Cavalier was tier 5. In Heroes 3, it was the tier 6 underneath the Angel. In Heroes 5, it was the tier 6 under the Angel. In Heroes 4, it was the tier 4 alongside the Angel. So yeah, I saw the Cavaliers and I'm like, oh, yep, obviously that's a tier 7. Or sorry, that's a tier 6. And then I started fighting and I'm going like, oh, these guys really just kind of fold for a tier 6. They're not even doing a whole lot of damage. And it wasn't until I actually got to play Temple for the first time and I'm like, wait a minute, these guys are tier 5? That's not right. It explains why they feel so weak and squishy, but they're not tier 5s. These guys are supposed to be tier 6. They're breaking the hero code. Anyway, as for the cavalry itself, I was saying it's kind of squishy, and I was saying it doesn't hit as hard. And again, I think a lot of that is just the bias that I brought in, thinking it was supposed to be a tier 6 until I realized it wasn't. And so now I'm trying to wrap my head around, I have a tier 5 cavalry, not a tier 6. So I can't have the same expectations that I had in the past for it. And I'll probably get there someday. But not today. Today it gets blamed for not being a tier 6. Anyway, as for what actually matters involving it and its tier 6 counterparts, its HP at 85 is actually I think it's the best. No, it's not the best. It's one of the best HP stats for a tier 5. And I know I was saying it doesn't feel bulky. Again, it's pretty decent bulk. 13 defense is pretty actually 13 defense is ass. Never mind. 13 defense sucks. Okay, so they really are squishier than... Okay, so I am right. I feel slightly more vindicated as I'm comparing them to the other units really quick here. I'm feeling much more vindicated that they're squishier than they should be. What's worse is their attack stat is absolutely abysmal. 12. Minotaurs, a tier 4 unit, have 12 attack. Compare this to the Quaddle's probably not a good comparison. But let's look at some of the other units. So like the Hive unit has 19 attack. The Sylvan unit has 12 attack, like it, but it has 15 defense, unlike that 13. So, got that going. The Concubines have 17 attack. The Likes have 12 attack. So, okay, so they're tied with the Likes. Medusa have 16 attack. So yeah, they don't hit hard. Their damage range at 10 to 14 is also really low. Like really low. Okay, these guys suck in terms of damage. Okay, I'm feeling a lot more vindicated in my assessments as I've been playing, going, why do the Cavaliers feel so pathetic? They really are. Now that I've gotten a chance to really just put them side by side with their constituents, these guys suck. Holy shit. 6 speed is really good. You can't knock 6 speed, but they can't do anything with it except run away. I guess 11 initiative is pretty good. Again, helps them to run away. The only thing they're fucking good at, apparently. Granted, I should note, sorry, before I've been hammering them so hard, I should note here they also have passive traits. Piercing Strike 1, which ignores 20% of the enemy's defense. Inspiring 1, which increases friendly units' morale by 1. And Jousting Bonus, which is a standard Cavalier ability from older Heroes games, which is for each hex that they move before they attack, it increases their damage output. So, obviously, don't just stand there and attack. They want to, even if you're going to attack the same enemy, do everything in your power to move as far as you possibly can before you land the attack. It's another reason why people who aren't necessarily aware of Jousting Bonus will run in, hit the enemy, do pretty decent damage. I mean, you pierce 20% of their defense, and you get all that extra bonus damage from moving. And then if they don't move in the follow-up attack is just feels really bad. But unfortunately, ignoring 20% of the enemy's armor, even with the bonus damage from moving a hex, at 12 attack, they're not hitting that hard, is the thing. You need to have of your 6 move, I would say, I'll be generous and say you probably want at least 3 hexes moved just to output kind of acceptable damage. Note it's kind of acceptable. You really need all 6 tiles or hexes moved, and that's to put out slightly better damage than what you might expect from other tier 5s. But even then, it's not the best damage output of a tier 5. It's just, they're slightly above the curve if they can get all 6 of their moves in before they hit something. Okay, I feel so much more vindicated after all of this. These guys suck. God damn, I'll give them more than the Griffin. Get out of the fucking way. Get out of the way. Fine. Do it that way. These guys suck. I wish they were better. They deserve better. Their first upgrade, the Noble. Oh yeah. Also, their build order. There is one very valuable thing about the cat. You know what? It's actually going to change their position now that I think about it. Because there's one thing that the cavalry have, which is the Hippodrome requires only the Griffin Rookery to be built, because the muses are pre-built in your starting towns, if nothing else. Not in every town are you going to have muses, but in more often than not, at the very least, your primary castle is going to have the muses, or the muse built. And these guys don't. The Hippodrome is dirt cheap, like super super cheap. I'll give them C tier because they're accessible. And early in the game, they can definitely do some damage against neutral units. You can do a little bit of work with them early in the game, just because they are very accessible. I'll give them C tier for that. I don't like it, but I'll do it to be fair. But none of the other factions even care. These guys suck. None of the other factions would even touch them if they had better options, which is pretty much anything. All right, Noble Cavalry. No statistical changes except for their initiative, which goes up by 3 from 11 to 14. Their piercing is increased from piercing 1 to piercing 2, which now ignores 30% defense instead of 20. Their inspiring is boosted to 2, which now boosts all your allies' morale by 2. And their jousting bonus is increased to 6% bonus damage per hex, as opposed to 3%. These guys are like everything about. There's one other thing I need that they have, one other ability, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. Basically, everything that I just listed off here, minus the initiative boost, which I do love the initiative boost, but these huge passive trait increases are honestly like so necessary, because with them, this unit actually feels like an actual unit. Not necessarily a good unit, but it feels like it's actually a unit now. Like you're actually getting what you fucking paid for, as opposed to the previous one. And you can see this kind of reflected, I should note, in their cost. The cavalry unit is 790 per unit. The noble cavalry is 1,120. I don't know if they're worth that much, I'll be honest. They're probably closer to like let's say 950 to maybe 1,000. Somewhere in that ballpark. But again, those passive trait increases at least make the cavalry feel like a decent unit. But the active ability, this is one I really wanted to talk about here. So their active ability takes 2 focus points, and it's called Charge. It increases the speed and initiative of all friendly creatures by 1 for 1 round. That is awesome. I love that. I love boosting my speed and initiative by 1. But did you catch the problem with it? Its ability cost is 2 focus points. That means that unless you build your hero specifically so that you can get Charge to go off on turn 1, you are not going to be able to get Charge to go off on turn 1, which is when it matters the absolute most. I'm not saying it's a useless ability further into the battle, but it's at its most powerful on turn 1, and you can't use it on turn 1 without building your hero specifically to do that. And I wanted to bring that into the light here for this tier list, because that still just blows my mind that they gave the Cavalier this amazing ability, but you never get to use it when it matters most. You just get to use it, and it's still good. It's still good on turn 4. It's still good on turn 8. It's a good ability. It's just, you want to use it on turn 1, and it takes so much investment to get it. Which means it's just kind of a decent ability. So similar to the Griffins, though, and the previous one, the Hippodrome, it's relatively cheap, except now we're getting into the units that actually kind of take a huge toll on your arcane dust. I believe it's 50, right? It's 10, 20, 30, 40... Is it 65, 75, 100? I think it's 65, 75, 100, actually. I think it's 65. It's either 50 or 65. I wish I could remember this stuff, and I wish there was a dwelling list. I wish I was able to find a dwelling list on this website, but I couldn't. Unfortunately, that's the thing, is that it's really, really expensive in terms of arcane dust, early in the game, mind you, to upgrade the Hippodrome. So even though these units or these noble cavalier actually turn your cavalry into a viable unit, you can't afford to turn them into these viable units. I'm still going to slot them next to the cavalier because outside of being able to not afford the hippodrome upgrade, when there are other upgrades that are, well, probably not as necessary. This is probably a very necessary upgrade. It's just a matter of, can you find 65, 50 or 65? Can you find that much arcane dust really, really quickly and really early in the game? In some maps, yes. I'll be honest, there are some maps where the arcane dust is, there's just a lot more access to arcane dust, and you can definitely do it. And in those maps, this is probably like an A tier upgrade. But not every map is going to have that abundance of arcane dust. Like Jeebus Cross has an insane abundance of arcane dust, and it's really easy to promote, or really easy to get enough to upgrade these guys. But just because Jeebus Cross has it doesn't mean Fair and Square is going to have it. It doesn't mean that what's it called, Shamrock? I forget the names of the maps now. I'm blanking them all. The point is, and those are the only 4 maps we have in the demo. God forbid, however many maps are going to be out later, when the actual game releases. So you're not always going to have this abundant access to arcane dust, depending on the map. So for that reason, I will keep them in C tier only because they are a fantastic upgrade to the... I'll put them above. That's right. Because they are a fantastic upgrade to the cavalry unit, and they're a necessary upgrade to the cavalry unit, but it is unfortunately very expensive and requires a huge investment of arcane dust to get that upgrade. Okay, now we talked a lot about that one. Let's move on to Sunspear cavalry here. So, here's some nice buffs. Their attack goes to 15. Their defense goes to 16. Their damage goes up from 10 to 14 to 12 to 16. And their speed goes up by 1 to 7. They also get Piercing Strike 2, Inspiring 2, and Jousting 2. They also get Anointed for attack, which is whenever this unit gains a positive effect, increases attack by 2 until the end of battle. Oh my god. Once again, the upgrade saves this unit from being just complete ass. Similar to the Noble Cavalry, the Sunspear Cavalry is actually able to make effective use out of its stats and its passive traits, and it actually feels like it has a presence on the battlefield other than just taking up, other than being like a mobile fucking obstacle for the enemy to walk around. These are also just really good. I personally prefer them to the Noble Cavalry only because you can't use charge on turn 1. If they were ever buffed, even just like charge reduced to an ability cost of 1 so that there wasn't as much hero investment to get charge on turn 1, I would probably put Noble Cavalry higher. But because charge is just way too much of an investment to be active on turn 1, I would just rather have the Sunspear Cavalry for the extra speed, which as a result is 6% extra damage, in addition to just more attack, more defense, more damage. I love charge, but it's just way too expensive. And again, you miss the most important turn to have it. So for that reason, I'm going to penalize the Noble Cavalry and put the Sunspear above it. I also just, again, like the Sunspear more, so that's my bias showing through, but I think the Sunspear does earn that spot above it. Okay, enough talk of these units. Maybe. Cavalry suck. Okay, now we've had enough talk about those units. So the Inquisitors. The Inquisitors. I was pleasantly surprised and mind blown when I first saw these units in the game and wasn't really ready for them. I have a bad tendency when I first started playing this demo back in October Yeah, it would have been October, right? October? Yeah, October or November. I think it was October, though. But when I started playing when the demo came out, and I first saw these guys, like the idiot I am, I never bothered to mouse over them and right-click to just take a peek at their stats. I just went, oh, look, human. Oh, look, foot soldier. Must be within the range of level 1 to 4. Imagine my surprise when I walked up to them, barely fucking dealt any damage, and they come back with this mace and just cream my guy in the face. At which point I'm like, that shouldn't have happened. Clicked on the unit, went, oh, these aren't the tier 4 unit or equivalent thereof. These are a lot worse. So yeah, that was a fun little experience. Yeah, these guys are not a joke. They've got a bunch of HP. I believe it's the most even for their tier. Let me not make an ass of myself here. Yeah, they have the most HP for their tier by a little bit, beating out the Hydra by 20 HP. Their attack stat at 22 and defense stat at 26 are incredibly good. Beating out, yeah, they've. There's a few neutral units at tier 6 that can compete with those stats, but overall, those are very good stats. 22 attack, 26 defense is among the better units at tier 6. 19 to 23 damage is very respectable. It's not the most. There's a okay, actually it's one of the worst damage ranges of any tier 6, but it's still decent enough damage. Their initiative is 7, so pretty average. They're not going to go last, but they definitely aren't going to go first without a lot of help. They only have 3 speed. Oh, they only have 3 speed. They're very much like the Temple's equivalent of the Hydra. They're these bulky units. They hit pretty hard overall. They tank really well, and they take about 8 years to get into the fight. Now, you could make the argument they aren't supposed to run across the battlefield and get into the fight, that they're supposed to hang back and defend your shooters. Kind of like what I was saying the one Griffin was really good at doing. And you're not necessarily wrong, but I mean, when they... Oh, I should also note, sorry, I completely forgot traits again as we get into this. Let me go over traits and we'll get back into my thought there. So their passive trait is Unyielding 1, which ignores 20% of the enemy's attack value when they're struck, which is another reason why they feel so ungodly bulky, because that is not a small chunk of your attack that they're reducing. Their active ability, they have 2. The first one, Infuse Armor, costs 2 focus charges, and it increases this unit's defense by 5 and its speed by 1, as well as dispels any negative effects that restrict its movement. And it lasts for 2 rounds. It doesn't specify on this website, but I know from experience that it does not end your turn. So, yeah, I was looking around like, why doesn't it say that? Because it doesn't end your turn. You get to use that, you get more defense, you get an extra point of speed, and you get to use 2 of your focus charges. It's a pretty good ability. Chances are you're going to spend your ability points elsewhere, unless that 1 extra point of speed gets you to attack a unit you weren't otherwise going to get to attack. One of those options for why you're not going to use Infuse Armor as often as you might think is because its other ability, which costs 1 focus point, allows it to hit the target enemy and all enemies adjacent to that enemy. at no damage penalty, I should note. Really good. It's really good. It's another, like I said, it's another reason why that infused armor, as cool as it is, you're probably not going to get to use it as frequently as you might think, because there's a good chance that your Inquisitor's eating up the focus points it needs to use infused armor itself to use its other ability. But yeah, the Inquisitor overall, it's a really good unit. It's very bulky. The speed of 3 sucks. So garrison it, bring with your hero, and defend your range units. There's options for it. Overall, it's a pretty decent unit. More importantly is the fact that it requires only the Hippodrome, which as a result means it requires the Rookery. So it's very easy to get access to your Inquisitors very early on, because the Rookery and the Hippodrome don't cost any rare resources. The Inquisitor's Temple, or whatever it's called, I forgot off the top of my head. The Bastille, I don't know. Whatever it's called. That does cost, I want to say 10 gems. I'm pretty sure it's 10 gems. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's 10 gems. So it's a bit on the expensive side. Just a little bit. But it's still possible, however unlikely, that you'll run into a couple of gem piles, and you might not get 210. You might get like 8, maybe 7. But trading a little bit early on in the game to get those 3 extra gems, those 2 extra gems, whatever you need, it's really worth it. Even though these guys are slow, if you can get them on day, like, let's say 3, 4, depending on situation, maybe probably 5 or 6 is more likely, but within the first week, you can do a lot of work. I'm going to actually put them in A tier despite everything. A, because I feel like Haven needs something that's actually worth talking about in terms of the tier list here. And I feel like this is kind of the best they can offer. It's a relatively asterisk or 2 or 3, 4 inexpensive build-up and purchase of the dwelling itself. It does probably take a little bit of market trading to get there, but if you can get them, like I said, in the first week, it does make clearing out neutrals really, really easy, because these guys just do not die. They take so little damage, and they output not a great amount, but when you're fighting, small numbers of tier 5, tier 6, maybe a 1 stack of a tier 7, or just a whole bunch of like tier 1s through 4 type of thing, like they're just pretty good at dealing with that. So, and again, this is where I'm kind of just like, I really feel like Temple needs something to hit A tier, and this feels as appropriate as anything, even if it's not the best option available for a hero to have. Now, its upgrades, I kind of like both its upgrades. Specifically the Excommunicator, which is the second one. But the first one, the Mother Superior, increases the health by 25 to 175, increases the defense from 26 to 34, which is ludicrously high, especially for a tier 6. The damage is the same. The speed goes up by 1. Yay, more speed, even if 4 is kind of just sort of acceptable, maybe. It's still extra speed. I'm not going to complain. The unyielding is improved, so it goes from 20% to 30%. So they take, so in addition to their 8 extra defense, yes, you heard me. If you didn't remember, if you weren't doing the math, I'll do it for you. The 8 extra defense they get, they also reduce enemy damage by an additional 10%. These guys, I guess technically we could say gals, these gals do not die. It takes so much effort to put these ones down. They're not quite as painful to deal with as the regenerating hydras, the chthonic hydras from dungeon, but they are nevertheless a tough bitch to put into the ground. Good for you if you got them. Painful to deal with when you're the enemy. Their infused armor is improved, so it increases their defense by 10 instead of 5, and their speed by 2, yay, instead of 1. Still costs 2, but I'm actually a lot more inclined to save up for that extra focus, the 2 focus points for 2 speed. Even if it's just for 1 turn, 6 speed is... I mean, with haste support, that can let you cross the map if you can get there. So, just saying, it's a lot better. And I mean, 10 extra defense, why not go up to a base of 44 for the turn at 30% damage reduction and watch the enemy cry as they break their weapons on you. They also have the Celestial Flail, which functions the exact same as it did before. They're pretty good. However, kind of similar to what I was saying with the Hydras in the last tier list, the Chthonic Hydras, I should note, it's kind of something you generally just want to find a handful of these. You don't necessarily want to upgrade your Inquisitors. And I say that only because now we're talking 20 gem investment plus 75 arcane dust to get a unit that's doing basically the same thing that the other one was doing, but more so. It's not a bad upgrade. It's just not doing anything so much better or so important to your army composition that you need to have them. It's definitely an upgrade that you can feel a little bit safer putting off till, say, the mid game. You don't feel pressured to get it early. The Excommunicator, on the other hand, is basically the offensive version of the Mother Superior. So the Excommunicator, the attack shoots up from 22 to 28. The speed also goes up by 1 again to 4. The initiative also gets to go up by 1 to 8, so they get to act a little bit sooner, always fun. They get the Unyielding 2, so they also get to ignore 30% of the incoming damage. And they get the same infused armor 2, where it increases the defense by 10 and the speed by 2 at a cost of 2 points. But they trade out the Celestial Flail for Swift Penance, which deals 15 magic damage per Excommunicator in the stack to the target and all adjacent units, and dispels all positive effects from them. This costs 3 focus charges, or focus points, or charges, or whatever they're called. So it's expensive. And just so we kind of understand where we're going, so the Excommunicator's damage range, just to remind you, is 19 to 23. So you're taking a small damage penalty to use this ability. It is magic damage, I should note. So unless the enemy has resistance effects, it probably will equate to more damage in total, just because defense would reduce the normal damage. So it's not actually necessarily less damage, but it's probably just a little bit more on average. Depending on the unit in question, it's probably a little bit more. The Dispel effect is really cool. I mean, it still does hits the prime target plus all the adjacent, so it's still pretty good. I don't know how often you will get a chance to use this, because saving up 3 focus points, by itself, isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially since you're probably going to be using those focus points before/after this thing's turn in order to use other abilities. When you get it off, it feels good, but you're probably not going to get a chance to use it. Kind of like what I was saying with the other unit. I forget who it was now. Oh yeah, the not the Hierophant, the Sun's something or other. Whatever the red light weaver was, Sun's something, I believe it was. Yeah, you're probably not going to, like I said, you're probably not going to get a chance to use it as frequently as you think, but it is a pretty good ability when you get it off. So now, once again, similar to what I was saying with the Mother Superior, I don't feel that this upgrade does anything to the Inquisitor that is absolutely critical to having in the first week or two of the game. It just doesn't do anything that I'm like, I need to have this upgrade as soon as possible. I want it, but I'm fine waiting till week 3 if necessary. If there's other more important things to do, I feel okay putting off this upgrade. I do like it more than the Mother Superior. As we've talked about, I like to play with more offensive and aggressive units, and that's what this is the offensive unit of the Inquisitor. So it gets to go above the Mother Superior. All right. Been a long video, but that's okay, because we're finally on the last one. The Angels, the tier 7. Let's see if Temple has any saving grace. Can they actually make it into the S tier with anything? Here is their chance. So the Angel comes with 250 health, 30 attack, 30 defense, and a damage range of 50 to 75. They have 4 speed, which on the surface sounds bad, but they're a range unit, so they make up for it. It's okay. Again, range units don't necessarily need a lot of speed, and they got good enough speed for a range unit. Initiative of 8. That's a little bit more disappointing when you compare them to some of the other tier 7s. Let's see here. We got like the Dragon has 12 initiative. The Vampires have 11. The Abyssal Envoys actually only have 9. A little disappointing. I don't even know why I'm looking at the Phoenix. Obviously, it has the highest at 14. The Hive Queens have 9. And then just to grab 1 or 2 of the tier 7 neutrals. Well, we can just go. Initiative 11. Initiative 1. Initiative 9. So, yeah, the initiative is kind of, it's there. It's a higher initiative overall, like compared to all creatures. But in terms of tier 7, it's good enough. It's better than some. It's not as good as I'd probably like it. So, good enough. Its passive trait, Forging Protection. Whenever a positive effect is applied to a friendly unit, it is also applied to this unit. The effect's duration and power are copied. If the effect targets multiple stacks, it only targets this stack once. That's pretty cool. I really like that because it basically means you can cast, say, I don't know, I'm just going to grab a couple spells, like a Favorable Winds or Haste or Early Start on one unit and also get it applied to your Angel. It's just value because you're multicasting a spell for free. It's a really good ability. I like it a lot. Active ability, it has Refract and Reflect, which applies a copy of all positive effects currently on this unit to target friendly unit. It does not trigger Forging Protection. So, I mean, basically what that means is it doesn't refresh any abilities that are on the Angel, but it does mean that you can, well, unfortunately you have to give up your turn, I believe. It doesn't say on here if you don't end your turn. I don't remember. Do you have to end your turn? I feel like you don't have to end your turn. Now I forgot. Don't hate me if you don't have to end your turn, but I think it is, according to what I have here, because they're not specifying, I believe this does end your turn. So you basically get a free extra spell cast where you cast all the spells that you've cast up till this point on other units that have been applied to the angel, all onto one other unit. It's not a bad ability. It is only one focus charge, so it's easy to get to and to cast. It's fine. I think it's a good ability. I think it has some value. I've definitely used it once or twice. It's really hard to commit to using it. You really have to have a good chunk of buffs on the angel to really make it worthwhile. Or you have to have a dying stack of angels. That's another reason why you might do it. Because giving up your tier 7's turn in order to cast, say, let's say 2 spells, whether it's like haste and early start or what have you, really not worth giving up your angel's turn for. If it doesn't end the turn, again, I forgot, don't hate me. If it doesn't end your turn, this is an absolutely fantastic ability. Use it all the time. If it ends your turn, you're not going to see much use of it. But now we get to some of the other qualifying factors. First off, if you see one of these in a merc camp, it doesn't matter what faction you are, you're probably taking it. Especially if it's early in the game. Because it's just a nice thing to have early in the game, or on a side hero. It just gives them a lot of power to work with. However, their dwelling itself is probably not surprisingly on the more expensive side. In addition to needing the chapel or whatever the light weavers are built out of, which again I believe costs like 3 of all the rare resources, in addition to some other resources, you also need to have Mage Guild level 2, which is going to cost you 2 of all the rare resources and some other, and some change. And the Griffin Rookery, I guess, but that's, again, the Griffin Rookery is dirt cheap. There's no reason you can't really afford that pretty early on. It's also going to run you 5 Mercury, 5 Crystal, and I believe 15 gems. Either 10 or 15. I'm pretty sure it's 15 gems. So it's costly. It's not gonna be a cheap dinner date to get the angel. Is it worth it? Yeah, I'd say yeah. It's B tier. The angel's far from bad, but I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on it. I think it's a good unit. Does its job. You're glad to have it, especially since, as we've talked about before, there's a good chunk of the temple units that are in desperate need of a unit that can actually, do work, because they aren't going to be doing work. So I'll give it B tier for that. It is just, I think the biggest hindrance is this, that it's pretty good. Like it's actually okay. I shouldn't say pretty good. On a scale of 1 to the best, it's sitting at like a 7.5 to 8. It's a pretty decent tier 7 unit. It has some very minor flaws in that its HP is good but not great. Its attack and defense are actually great. Its attack and defense are very good. The potential damage is the most out of any tiers. Let me correct myself by making an ass of myself. Yes, its potential damage is the highest out of any tier 7. In fact, its minimum damage even is on par with, if not higher than, other tier 7. So its damage is really good. Really, really good. It's just so expensive to get the forge. I can't. I don't want to move them out of B tier. Please make an argument for why you think they should be in A tier. I think they're good, but I don't think they're quite good enough to get into A tier. I think the forge cost is just a little too much to put them into A tier. They're just not quite accessible enough to make A tier. Okay, Archangel. Increases the attack stat by 5, increases speed stat by 1, increases initiative by a whopping 4. Yay, we got our initiative. And hey, we got more damage or more attack. And again, I love that. So you probably know where this is going. So its passive traits still has the forging protection, but it also gains sharpshooter, so it deals full range damage at any range and over any obstacle. And oh dear God, thank you. I was saying before how the best thing you can do with your Sun's Herald or whatever the hell the one thing that could bless your units is to bless your angel. This is the angel to bless. Let all your angels, whether it's 1, whether it's 3, whether it's 250 million, let them all do 75 damage when they throw that spear to any unit, regardless of where that unit is relative to the angel. That sharpshooter is so fantastic on angels. And it really, really helps make them feel like the powerhouses they kind of look like in the first form. That's the other thing I should note. Now that I'm talking about sharpshooter. So that 50 to 75 damage range is really, really cool. But you have to remember that unless you're at close range, you're doing half damage. You're taking the range penalty. If you're shooting over walls, you're taking the range penalty. So that damage is really high until it isn't. And the Archangel moves that penalty. Now you get to do all that damage regardless. It feels so good to have Archangels. They do so much work. I haven't even gotten to their other. They retain the give me a second. The refract and reflect, and also gain the devouring chalice. So this dispels all positive effects from enemies within a 1 hex radius of the chosen hex and applies them to this unit. So you can steal all your enemies' buffs and give them to yourself. Takes 2 focus points. It's a little on the pricey side, but it is a pretty cool ability. I don't find myself using it too often, at least not against AI, because the AI... my battles with the AI have never really lasted long enough for them to cast more than like 2 spells on a particular unit, and I've never really felt obliged to steal those 2 spells. But it is a good ability all the same, and in other battles, probably with actual human players, there's more of a reason to use this. Or if you're in a bigger, longer battle where their enemy has more chances to cast spells, so that they have a reason to put more than like 1 or 2 buffs. Yeah, I like the Archangel. I think this is, like I said, I think I felt a little disappointed in the original Angel, only because, again, you kind of take the range penalty, so all that damage feels really bad. And these guys definitely fix it. I don't know if they make S tier. I kind of gave the dragons S tier, despite the cost of the dwelling. I feel like the dragons really earned S tier. I feel like the Archangel just does what the original Angel wanted to do. The 2 dragons, I think, did. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I think the Black and the Ashen Dragon did more to improve the Cave Dragon than the Archangel does to improve the Angel. Well, no. No, that's not true. The Archangel is a huge angel. All right, I'll give it S tier. It does pretty close to the same amount of work that the Black and Ashen Dragon do versus the Cave Dragon that this does to the. I'll give it S tier. That's fine. That's fine. Plus, I mean, the poor temple. They gotta have something in S tier, right? All right, the Apotheosis. So retains. Oh, oops! I forgot the stats. So the stats actually increase. It gets 50 extra health up to 300. Its attack also goes to 35. Its defense jumps by 10 to a whopping 40. Its speed goes up to 9, so it can now, actually cross the map a little bit. Well, I think it can get pretty close to crossing the map. I think 9's just shy of crossing the map. So it either needs tactic or haste support, but with one of those, God forbid both, it can cross the map very efficiently. And its initiative of 9 is better, but 9 is good, but not like special. There's a lot of units that are going to be acting before the Angel or the Apotheosis. But it's fine. 9 isn't like bad by any means. Retains Forging Protection, gains Duelist, so it deals full melee damage, gains Purity Aura, which this unit and its adjacent units are immune to all negative effects. Pretty cool. Definitely like that. No one can. What's that spell? Blank on it. Eclipse. You can't eclipse the Apotheosis, which is weird to say because the fact that it has Duelist and this movement is like they're trying to turn it into like this melee unit, but it's still ranged, so I don't really understand why they're trying to do this. Like it also doubles as a melee unit. I'm like, why? So like when the enemy closes the distance, you can just fly across the map into the swarm of enemies to hit the one you want to hit instead. I don't really understand the mentality behind turning the Angel into this hybrid melee / ranged unit. I don't understand why. Because I would much rather just throw javelins until the enemy is foolish enough to come and fight the Angel. Again, you are taking the half damage at range, so by giving it this not preferred, but this alternate ability where it's it can fight in melee without penalty, means that it's another way for you to gain access to that 50 to 75 damage without being penalized for it. Oh shit, I'm sorry, I forgot its other active ability. It also gained Unbending Pride. Dispels all negative effects from this unit and fully restores its HP. Does not end the turn. See, it specifies it there, which is why I'm confused as to whether refract and reflect those. Anyway, cost 1 focus point. Unbending Pride. Yada yada yada. Where was I going with my thought process? Let's get back on track. So, yeah, I just, like I said, don't understand exactly why. Because it's cool that you're giving it the ability to utilize its 50 to 75 damage without penalty by going into melee. But you could just have Archangels and they get access to that damage without going into melee. So why the Apotheosis? Well, if the enemy closes the distance. Well, if the enemy is closing the distance, yeah, that's a great way to get access to that damage range that the Angel has at full value. But I don't. If you're worried about the enemy closing the distance, I don't even know where to go with this thought process here. I'm trying to wrap my head around why you would want the Apotheosis. Because the Archangel's higher initiative means it's more likely to go first at 12, so it can throw its spear before the enemy, or at least a good chunk of the enemy move. So they'll get full damage from their spear. You can always lock in your angel if you're worried about the enemy closing the distance. I'm trying to wrap my head around the mentality of making a ranged unit into a melee unit. Like back in the day when when the giant would upgrade into the Titan and go from being melee to range, that made a lot of sense. I don't think the Apotheosis is a bad unit, but I am struggling to wrap my mind around why you would want it over the Archangel, because it's still suffering from the half damage at range that the normal Angel is suffering from. Or, well, I should say beyond short range / over walls and yada, yada, yada. So to compensate, it's like, why not just run in and start beating shit in the face? But why, when the Archangel is available, would you take that option? I don't think it's a bad unit. I don't understand why you would want it over the Archangel. There's got to be a reason. I've had fun with it. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with the unit. I just don't see it being better or even on par with the Archangel. So I'm dropping it in A tier because it is better than the Angel. Again, sure, you still suffer from that range penalty, but at least you have a option to make use of that damage range, even if the Archangel does it better. So, yeah, that's kind of my tier list there. Temple's weird for me, anyway. Like I said, I just feel Temple is in a very, very bad spot right now. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that they're in a bad spot. I feel like Temple's weak, but I don't think it's weak in the sense that it's like underpowered or misbalanced or imbalanced or whatever you want to call it. I just feel like they rely more on their laws than other factions do, which is weird to say, because like Dungeon really, really, really loves its laws too. The argument can be made that even the argument can be made that all 4 of the playable factions in the demo really love their law. But I guess if I had to put them, like, which faction is more reliant on their laws than others, I feel like Temple is more reliant on its laws to execute its game plan than the other ones are. And hey, I mean, I didn't actually put anything in F tier. I kind of want to put the Griffin in F tier, but I'm giving it benefit of the doubt because it's a flyer. I mean, it's going to die because it's the only thing behind the enemy walls at that point, unless you recruited other flyers. Because your Angel, unless you want Apotheosis, and that's late in the game, is not going to be joining the Griffin on the enemy side of the Bearments, the battlements. That's how you say that. Yeah, I don't know this. I feel like Temple is just trying too hard to combine the old wizard factions from Heroes 2 and 3 and 5 and yada 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 with the humans. What with their having 3 range units like wizards used to have back in the day. I guess they have 2 flyers, but one of them's also a range unit. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Temple is, strictly speaking, a bad faction, but I do feel like they probably need just a little bit more love, just a few tweaks. Whether it's reducing some, and I do mean some, keep this in mind. I mean a very small amount of power out of their laws in order to pump that power more into their units, just so that they aren't as reliant on laws for make their units valuable. Maybe I'm not saying it's a great idea, but it's thought. But as I'm looking at the tier list here, the only other thing I can really say is like this is probably, I'm trying to think. I don't want to take too long, but I think this is probably the only faction where I really want to rush the upgrades for their tier 1 and their tier 2, for example, as we can see here. I think the swordsman upgrade and I think the marksman upgrade is even more. Actually, that's a good point. I think the marksman's upgrade is even more important than the swordsman's upgrade. But I do think that those two units, the tier 1 and tier 2, I think they benefit more from their upgrades than the other units benefit from their upgrades. The exception being the Cavalier, but again, if you're playing a map where you can get 50 arcane dust, then by all means upgrade your calves right away. You can get them upgraded and make them start being useful. But there's a very good chance that on most maps you're not going to get 50 arcane dust in the first week or two. Maybe in the second week. But probably not so much in the first week. So, but yeah, outside of the Cavs, I don't feel like anything benefits as much as the tier 1 and tier 2 from their upgrades. So, I guess the Angel does, but the way I scale it, but that's kind of the exception. The tier 7s tend to be. Yeah, I'm happy with that tier list. I think I can end this video happily and wait for you guys to rail on me for my misplacements and my misjudgments and everything else I've done so poorly when it comes to rating these units. But I feel pretty confident in my assessment. Maybe, okay, in fairness, I'm not 100% sure I like the Inquisitor being an A tier. I kind of tier. But this is definitely just the bias of Temple is so desperate for a good unit, and the Inquisitor is the best they kind of have access to, and it's mildly inexpensive. Kind of. It's expensive. It's not as expensive as the game. I'll give it 8. That reason is. All right. I'm getting out of here. We're done. We'll see you guys around.